Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Approve's webinar. Great to see so many of you joining today. Today, we are going to introduce you to our latest 2021 R5 release. This release predominantly contains a major video interface and functionality upgrade. And we also have some nice new security features and a couple of other small things that we'll show you today. Before we get going, I wanted to introduce you to our host today. Jeff Ross recently joined us from AAA Life Insurance, where he was the system admin for Aproove. Jeff has joined us in a customer success capacity, and you will more than likely be hearing much more from him in the coming months and hopefully years as he progresses here at Aproove. During today's webinar, we will mute all of the attendees to avoid any background noise. However, you do have the capacity to ask questions in the chat window. You'll notice the small Q&A button down the bottom of the panel. And if you click on that, you're able to ask some questions. What we would do at the end of the webinar, if there's any questions, we will answer them right away at the end of the webinar. And we'll get those answers over to you straight away. So without further ado, I guess I'll pass you now over to Jeff, who's going to start the webinar. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Gary, and a warm welcome to all those in attendance. As fate would have it, I joined Aproove just in time to be part of this new release. As the fifth release, or release 5 of the calendar year, it goes by the name of 2021 R5. At Aproove, a new version release is usually a smorgasbord of fantastic new features and enhancements. This version is a bit different as it concentrates on video capabilities, specifically proofing enhancements and the video user interface. As we look at these new video capabilities, consider not only how your team presently uses Aproove, but also how you or other teams in your organization could utilize these video features. And of course, video may become a need down the line. So let's pull back the curtain and see these new video features in practice. Here we are on the homepage of the user portal. And this project is the one for our demo. To open it, I simply click on it, which takes me to the project dashboard for this project. Clicking on the thumbnail under project details takes me to the proof display window, which shows the video file that has been ingested into the project. Here's some good news. The processing of video files happens when it is added to the project, which means no buffering or delays on playback. Even if your video is Apple ProRes 422 or 4K, it will not buffer on files that large, all thanks to Aproove's pre-processing. Also, the Aproove system processes the video right down to individual frames, which is pretty awesome. In this scenario, we'll pretend I work for McDonald's digital media team. I have a piping hot cup of McDonald's coffee at my side, and I'm ready to review this now vintage TV commercial that ran in the 80s. Budgets are kind of tight, so they decided to rerun it almost 40 years later. And my job is to review it. As an aside, if you actually remember this commercial from back in the day, let us know in the chat. At first glance, we see some familiar controls that you would find in a conventional video player, say on YouTube or Vimeo. We have our play button. We have our next frame button. We have our previous frame button, and the video timeline running across the bottom. This little blue circle, well, that's the playhead. And that advances automatically by clicking play, by advancing frames, or by going backwards. You can also click and hold on the playhead to move it manually to a desired location. Within proof information, there's a wealth of vital statistics on the video file, such as resolution, frames per second. So this particular video file is almost 30 frames per second. Length, this video is just a hair over 30 seconds. Video codec info, audio codec info, and other stats that a video professional would find helpful. And speaking of video professionals, they sure do like this burn time code in the video. And just kind of breaking this down, the first set of numbers is hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. You also have control over the playback speed. So you can slow it down all the way to 0.25 times, and you can speed it up all the way to 16 times. And of course, your volume slider is here in the lower right. Let's look at adding notes to video files. For the sake of time, I added a note here. And as you will immediately notice, we've adapted the note interface for video. And I'd also like to point out that on the timeline, there is a yellow dot for the note with its corresponding number. So this is note 1, as seen here, note 1. If I added additional notes to this video at different points, they would populate on the timeline with yellow dots and their corresponding number. If I click on the name of the user in this note, it moves the playhead to the start of this note. You can define the duration of a note, which means you are not confined to putting a note on just a single frame, but can note a section of the video. In this case, this note starts at the 7th second of the video and on the 11th frame of that 7th second, and it ends at the 10th second, specifically the 13th frame of that 10th second. Arguably, the coolest note feature in this release is note looping. When turned on, you will see this icon, the little yellow circle with the arrows. And the beauty of that feature is that when you click play, it will play the note in loop form. So it will start at second 7, play till 10, rewind, and continue looping until you either click pause or turn note looping off, which you can do by either clicking on the looping on note icon here or on the play button. And finally, you can comment on a note using @mentions in the traditional way that you're used to commenting on notes right here. So I think we're in luck, and the video editor has uploaded a V2 file with my requested change to add "I'm loving it." So let's jump into comparison view to see the revision. Here we see the original V1 file on the left and the revised V2 file on the right. I'll click my username to jump the playhead to the beginning of the note, and then hit play on the left to see if the change was made. And sure enough, there is the "I'm loving it" graphic. And if you noted, both sides played simultaneously in side-by-side mode This is a significant feature in this release. And since the change has been made, and I am loving it, I will officially close this note by resolving it. While we're in comparison view, there are some interesting features to highlight. You already saw the side-by-side simultaneous playback when I compared the V1 and V2 files. Side note, if the V2 file is shorter or longer than the V1, naturally, the videos will fall out of sync. In addition to playback, we've synchronized other functions between the left and the right. One of those is playback speed. So when I adjust the playback speed on the left, it adjusts on the right. And when I click next frame or previous frame on the left, it moves in tandem on the right. That said, anything done on the right is independent of the left. If you're wondering why that is, it is to allow you to work outside of the side-by-side synchronization if you wish to. And finally, we've made the volume setting independent of side. So if I adjust the volume on the left, it will not adjust the right. If I adjust the right, it will not adjust the left. Before we close the conversation on video, let's do a quick recap. To this point, we've looked at the note interface for video and how to annotate, the note looping feature on individual notes, and how video comparison works. Now, let's supersize this presentation with some back-end brilliance. We've incorporated several powerful video admin settings within processing options of the project config. Here's that burn time code option I referenced earlier. From multiple streaming resolution to mobile support, you have control over how Aproove handles or processes your video files. If you're wondering which video file types Aproove accepts, we've included a link on this slide to our supported file formats page. In case you're wondering, this keynote will be made available to you after the presentation. In addition to video, there are a few notable enhancements I'd like to highlight pertaining to security and annotation. All right, hold the phone. Gary is actually emailing me during a live presentation. Looks like he's forwarded me a task invitation from Aproove that, of course, he wants done immediately. So if you good people will give me just a second, I think I can take care of this off screen. So Gary, I've got some bad news for you. Your login credentials are required to open this task. Since sharing your login with someone else is a security breach and against company policy, it looks like I'm punting this one back to you. So why didn't my login credentials open the task? And why did the system require Gary's login? It's all thanks to our new security restriction on forwarded tasks. This feature was born of the customer need to prevent certain user groups from forwarding tasks to users who would then see or access projects they should not have access to. To activate this feature, you must check Enforce Identity on User Tasks in the project config. Last but not least, we made an aesthetic tweak to the annotation line. As seen in these clips, the challenge is that the background on which I'm annotating is nearly the same color blue. In previous versions of Aproove, that would have been a problem. But because of the nifty outer glow we've added to the line, visibility has never been better. As the saying goes, all good new release webinars must come to an end. Before I turn it over to Gary for questions and wrap up, I would like to thank you for attending and being a valued member of the Aproove community. Gary?
Thank you, Jeff. I bet you're glad that you've got that one over with, your first ever webinar at Aproove. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
So just to let you know, we didn't receive any questions during the webinar. I think that was predictable because it was pretty self-explanatory about the video and the interface and the functionality that's been added. I will point out to everyone that we do plan to do these webinars on a regular basis when we do a release. And the idea behind that is that we can give you a bit of insight into what we've released and also then record the video that we do in the webinar and make that available to people so that you have a backlog and a history of the releases. Running alongside that, we also plan to do more business logic type webinars, and Jeff has already been tasked with doing one for us. It may be in December or we may push it out into early January because of the holiday season. The idea with that webinar that Jeff's currently working on is we've just recently added a lot of new functionality around tags. Tags are extremely powerful, and now you can also apply them across projects, proofs, sections, and annotations. So they can be heavily used throughout the system. The problem with tags is that unless you're sort of explained them from a business logic angle, they can be difficult to understand without the logic behind them. And how do they apply to me in my business? How will they help me? So what we've tasked Jeff to do is actually come up with a webinar where he uses all of the different types of tags and he then applies them in an actual scenario that may be useful to our customers. So Jeff's going to be working on that one, and we'll drop out an invite to everyone to let you know when that's going to be released. Just while I was talking now, I did receive a question from Brett here, who's asked, does video include an auto comparison tool, or is it just a side-by-side visual comparison? So the answer to that, Brett, at the moment, it's the side-by-side visual comparison. However, you can click on the annotation notes and it will take you directly to where the correction should have been made. Video is slightly different, obviously, to static image in that when you do a comparison view, it's on a moving timeline. So in reality, the best you can do really is have them side by side. Now, obviously, that can throw problems if you start editing the length of the new version against the old version and so on and so forth. So we will be adding more functionality to the video as we do with all of our features. The idea really is that we release it, we get the feedback. Once we got the feedback, we start adding more functions and functionality to those new functions. So hopefully that answers your question there, Brett. Okay, so I think that's all I've got to say. All that leaves me to say is thank you so much for attending. What we will do is make all of this presentation and the keynote slides available to you, and we will drop you an email in the next day or two to let you have the links to those. So all that's left to say is thanks, Jeff, for your time and preparation of the webinar, and thank you all for attending, and we hope to speak to you all soon. Take care.